My name is Aloan Frost. I am 33 years old. Until last Tuesday, I believed I understood the limits of family, love, and betrayal. I was mistaken. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. The paper was crisp and formal, carrying the sharp smell of ink and unease. It was not delivered by the usual mail carrier. Instead, a man in a dark uniform handed it to me at my apartment door. His expression was neutral, his eyes avoiding mine, as if I were already on trial. When I read the words family court and petition for conservatorship printed in stark black letters, the ground beneath me did not merely shift, it disappeared. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. My own parents. Before going further, it is important to explain what my life looked like before that envelope arrived. I lived in a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of the city. I worked as a senior archivist at the City Historical Society, a role that paid modestly but gave me deep satisfaction. My days were spent with old letters, faded photographs, and the silent, dusty histories of people long gone. The work was calm. I valued the quiet. I had built a careful, measured life, piece by piece, after a childhood that felt like walking across cracked eggshells. My parents, Robert and Diana Frost, were experts at maintaining appearances. From the outside, our family looked ideal. A colonial home in the Willow Creek subdivision, luxury cars, charity galas, country club memberships. My father was a partner at a respected law firm. My mother chaired committees. They were widely seen as pillars of the community. Inside the house, however, the atmosphere was different. It was cold, controlled, and conditional. Love was not freely given. It was exchanged. Affection was a reward, distributed based on performance. My younger brother, Asher, 2 years my junior, understood this system well. He matched their ambitions, repeated their views, and received steady approval. I was the failed version. Too quiet, too focused on books, too satisfied with simple things. I did not want a corner office. I wanted a corner in a library. I did not dream of networking events. I wanted to decipher the handwriting in a century-old diary. To them, this was not merely a difference. It was a flaw. The real breaking point came 8 years ago, when I was 25. I had just completed my master's degree in archival science. At a family dinner meant to celebrate, my father slid a brochure for a business management program across the table. "This is where you need to be," he said, his tone final. "This archival nonsense ends now. We've supported this hobby long enough." I looked to my mother for support. She was focused on her nails, wearing a faint look of disapproval. "Your father knows what's best for your future," she said without meeting my eyes. That night, I made a decision that shaped everything afterward. I thanked them for dinner, went to my old bedroom, packed one suitcase, and left. I did not slam the door. I closed it quietly, realizing that the silence I was leaving was finally my own. The years that followed were difficult. I waited tables, shared an apartment with 3 other people, and saved every spare cent. The job at the Historical Society was a lifeline. I started as a junior assistant and worked my way up. I built my life with patience and intention. I paid off my student loans, saved for a used car, and spent years scraping together the down payment for my modest apartment. There was no trust fund and no backup plan. It was only me. It was the hardest and most fulfilling work I had ever done. After I left, contact with my parents was minimal, brief, stiff calls on birthdays and holidays. They treated my independence as a phase, something they assumed I would abandon. When I bought my apartment, my mother's only remark was, "I hope it's in a safe neighborhood." They never visited. They did not know what my home looked like or what it meant to me. They only knew it was mine, and in their world, that meant it was beyond their control. So when the court papers arrived, it was not entirely unexpected. It was the extreme step I had always feared but never truly believed they would take. They were asking the court to declare that I, a 33-year-old woman with a steady job, a clean credit record, and a fully paid home, could not manage my own life. They wanted authority over everything: my finances, my assets, my decisions. The stated reason was a supposed pattern of financial immaturity and emotional instability that allegedly placed me at risk. The evidence was a list of choices they viewed as irresponsible: my career, my independence, my refusal to pursue higher earnings. They claimed I was vulnerable, easily influenced, and wasting my resources. My hands trembled as I read. The petition had been filed by Arthur Vance, a lawyer from my father's firm. I could hear my father's voice in the legal language and picture my mother's quiet approval. They assumed I would be overwhelmed. They assumed I would collapse. For a brief moment, I almost did. Old doubts surfaced, the feeling of never being enough. Then I looked around my living room, at the bookshelf I had built myself, filled with novels and historical texts, at the peace lily by the window that I had grown from a seedling. This was my life. I had built it, and I refused to let them dismantle it simply because they did not value it. I took a slow breath. Panic hardened into resolve. I was no longer the frightened woman who left 8 years earlier. I was someone who had earned every stable piece of her life. I picked up my phone. It was time to hire my own lawyer. I did not choose just anyone. I called Miranda. She is not widely known, but in certain legal circles, she has a formidable reputation. She specializes in cases involving coercive control, financial abuse, and predatory guardianships. I remembered her name from an article I had read years earlier about an artist whose parents tried to seize her inheritance. Miranda dismantled their case with precision. I had saved the article without knowing why. That instinct proved accurate. Her office was downtown, all glass and steel, far removed from the wood-paneled halls of my father's firm. She greeted me with a firm handshake. In her 50s, with sharp gray eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, she listened without interruption. "Your parents aren't bluffing," she said after reviewing the petition. "This is an aggressive move." I agreed. She asked me to explain everything, every interaction, every pattern, every condition attached to support. For 2 hours, I did. She listened closely, taking minimal notes. When I finished, she outlined the strategy. First, we would prove my competence through employment records, financial history, and testimony. Second, we would expose their motive. Not concern, but control, possibly financial pressure. She asked if they had ever probed my finances. I recalled a call 6 months earlier when my father asked about my investments and suggested an advisor from his firm. I had declined. Miranda noted it immediately. The hearing was 3 weeks away. She warned me to expect emotional manipulation in court and instructed me to remain calm and composed. My reaction, she explained, would be treated as evidence. I told her I could handle it. As I left her office, I felt afraid but focused. For the first time, I had professional support. I went straight to work, grounding myself in routine. My supervisor, Mrs. Gable, noticed immediately and closed her door. When I explained what was happening, her expression hardened with anger. "The absolute gall," she hissed. "You are the most capable, level-headed person I know. Your work is meticulous. Your finances are none of my concern. But you've never missed a single contribution to the coffee fund in 10 years. They want a fight. We'll give them one. Testimony, character references, whatever you need. You have my full support." That support became my anchor. Over the following days, while Miranda's team worked behind the scenes, I focused on concrete evidence. I gathered years of bank statements, tax returns, mortgage documents, and employment records. I built a timeline of my adult life, a ledger of independence. Every bill paid, every professional milestone, every small achievement in my apartment became a brick in my personal fortress. A week before the hearing, Miranda called, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Alone, we found something," she said. "Our investigator examined your parents' property records. The Willow Creek Colonial has been refinanced 3 times in 5 years. 2 liens from unpaid contractors. Their investment portfolio is a mess of high-risk failures, and there's a pending malpractice lawsuit against your father's firm, big enough to threaten his partnership." It clicked into place. It wasn't about control. It was about survival. My apartment, my savings, my car, they were a lifeline. They weren't trying to save me from myself. They were trying to save themselves. Miranda's tone turned serious. "We have to keep this secret. Let them present their case first. Then we dismantle it and expose their motives. The judge will not look kindly on petitioners acting in bad faith." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stood in my apartment, touching the spines of my books, observing the prints I'd collected, feeling the solidity of my life around me. This was more than a legal battle. It was a reckoning for the girl I was, the woman I had become, and the parents who had never seen me as anything beyond their own reflection. I chose a simple tailored navy dress. No frills, no flash, just quiet professionalism. At the courthouse lobby, Miranda gave me a single approving nod. "Remember," she whispered, "they are the performance. You are the truth." The courtroom was smaller and quieter than I expected, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old anxiety. The judge's bench was a dark, imposing slab. To the left, at the plaintiff's table, were my parents. My father, Robert, in his best suit, appearing every bit the patriarch. My mother, Diana, in a tailored cream suit, poised and composed. Between them, Arthur Vance reviewed his notes with a smug expression. Miranda led me to the defendant's table. The room felt divided. We occupied separate universes. I placed my hands flat on the cool table and followed Miranda's instructions. Eyes on the judge's bench, not them. I studied the details of the room, the scuff marks, the light through high windows, becoming a student of the environment. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Harold Winslow, stern and intelligent, settled in. Vance spoke first, his tone smooth. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a painful day for my clients, Robert and Diana Frost. They are here out of love and concern for their only daughter, Aloan." He painted me as fragile and dreamy, unprepared for the adult world. My apartment became a hermit's cave, my careful finances hoarding, my independence pathology. She is vulnerable to exploitation and making decisions that will lead to financial ruin, he claimed. Their aim, he said, was a limited conservatorship to protect me. Then my mother took the stand. Her voice was soft, just believable enough, portraying a concerned parent. She described me as withdrawn, solitary, resistant to encouragement, and living a life that broke her heart. Each story, the novels bought with birthday money, studying art history instead of pre-law, hiking trips over networking events, was crafted to show my incompetence. Her performance was flawless. Miranda began cross-examination, calm and deliberate. "Mrs. Frost, when was the last time you reviewed her actual financial records?" My mother faltered. "Well, we haven't. She won't share them." "So your concern is not based on evidence, but on her career and independent choices?" she asked. "A pattern of poor judgment," my mother repeated, "despite graduating with honors, earning a master's degree, maintaining a decade of employment, and purchasing a home without assistance." Miranda pressed on. "Does she have friends or a support system outside the family?" My mother claimed she had only work acquaintances. Miranda assured the court she would provide testimony from friends and colleagues to show my strong character and community connections. When asked if I would still need a conservator if I married, my mother hesitated, suggesting a husband would provide guidance. Miranda did not miss the implication. "Mrs. Frost, do you love your daughter?" My mother's mask slipped briefly. She answered, "Of course. That's why we're here." Next was my father. Vance's questions were technical, emphasizing risk assessment and fiduciary responsibility. He framed my life as a series of sentimental, unchecked choices, portraying my independence as obstinacy. When Miranda rose to cross-examine him, the atmosphere shifted, a subtle but tangible change, signaling the intensity of the scrutiny to come. "Mr. Frost, you are a partner at Sterling & Vance, correct?" Miranda began. "Yes," he replied. "A firm specializing in corporate and property law?" "Yes." "So you are familiar with liens, refinancing, and asset management?" My father's eyes narrowed. "I am." "Your Willow Creek home is impressive. How many times have you refinanced it in the last 5 years?" Vance leapt up. "Objection." Relevance. Judge Winslow looked at Miranda. "Counselor, it goes directly to the petitioner's credibility and motives, Your Honor. Their financial stability is relevant to their claim that they act solely out of concern." The judge considered briefly. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Miss Shaw." My father's jaw tightened. "I'd have to check, but 3 times sounds accurate. The market has been volatile, and the 2 liens currently filed, are they also due to market conditions?" The courtroom fell silent. My mother stiffened. Vance's face turned red with frustration. My father glared at Miranda, a crack in his composed facade. "I handle my personal affairs competently," he said, low and dangerous. "Unlike your daughter, whom you claim cannot handle hers." Miranda's tone was calm. "No further questions, Your Honor." She sat. A seed of doubt had been planted. The judge made a note. The mourning continued. Vance called a family friend and a psychiatrist, both echoing concerns about attachment and financial naivety, based solely on interviews with my parents. Miranda quickly dismantled their credibility, showing the psychiatrist had never met me. Then it was our turn. Miranda called Mrs. Gable, my boss, a forceful presence. She testified not only to my professional competence, but also my integrity, reliability, and leadership among volunteers. If Alone Frost is incompetent, she said, fixing the judge with a steely gaze, then so is everyone in this room. My bank manager presented accounts demonstrating consistent savings, excellent credit, and no debt beyond my mortgage. 2 friends from my book club spoke warmly of our friendship, shared dinners, and my stability. Each witness painted a clear, consistent portrait of a responsible, rooted, capable woman, contrasting sharply with the fragile image my parents had tried to create. As the afternoon light slanted through the windows, Miranda called me. Your Honor, the defense calls Alone Frost. My heart pounded. I walked to the stand, swore to tell the truth, and looked to Miranda for guidance. Her questions were simple and direct. I explained my education, career, and apartment purchase. I described preserving stories and honoring the past, showing my work was a calling, not a dead-end job. I discussed my routines, friendships, and financial planning, ordinary, responsible, and undeniably sane. Then Miranda approached the bench. Your Honor, we submit a comprehensive inventory of the respondent's assets for the record. The judge nodded. Miranda handed a thick bound document to the bailiff, who began reading. Item 1. Primary residence, Unit 4B at 321 Cedar Lane, owned outright. Market value approximately $400,000. My father's eyes flickered. Item 2. Retirement investment portfolio, diversified, current value $220,000. My mother's hand went to her throat. Item 3. Collection of rare first edition historical texts and personal journals, acquired over 10 years. Last professional appraisal, $1,500,000. The courtroom collectively inhaled. My father stared in shock, the mask of the concerned patriarch gone. Arthur Vance's smug expression vanished. My mother looked bewildered. Judge Winslow slammed his gavel. Order. Silence in my courtroom. The bailiff continued. Item 4. 1965 Ford Mustang, fully restored, garage kept, insured value $180,000. Item 5. Assorted historical artifacts and antique maps, insured value $300,000. Item 6. Municipal and corporate bonds portfolio $400,000. Item 7. Liquid savings and checking accounts $150,000. The final tally, over $2.5 million in assets, all self-acquired and carefully managed. The room fell silent. Judge Winslow leaned forward. Miss Shaw, your explanation. Miranda stood composed. Your Honor, this is a verified inventory prepared by licensed court-approved appraisers and auditors. Every item is documented, insured, and legally owned by Alone Frost. The collection of rare texts and journals represents a decade of scholarly curation with significant financial and historical value. Miss Frost has loaned pieces to university archives for study. It is not a hobby. It is a professional pursuit. This inventory proves 3 things. First, Alone Frost is financially competent, disciplined, and savvy. Second, the petitioner's claim of financial immaturity is not only incorrect, it is a gross misrepresentation. Third, she paused, letting it sink in, it raises the question of motive. Why would individuals facing substantial financial pressures seek control over a daughter who has independently managed her affairs so successfully? Vance leapt up. Your Honor, this is a trick. A last-minute ambush. We had no knowledge of these assets, if they exist. Counselor, Miranda interrupted, the very point is your lack of knowledge. You filed this petition on presumption and ignorance. You assumed there was nothing to see. You were wrong. Judge Winslow raised a hand. Mr. Vance, sit down. Miss Shaw, your client may step down. He turned to me. Miss Frost, is this your signature on the authentication documents for this inventory? Yes, Your Honor, and I affirm under penalty of perjury that this list is accurate and complete to the best of my knowledge. The judge looked at my parents. Their composure was shattered. My father's face was furious, my mother pale and confused. The performance was over. The raw truth was exposed. Mr. and Mrs. Frost, the judge said gravely, your petition claims your daughter is incapable of managing substantial assets. The court has been presented with compelling evidence that she has done so independently, without your knowledge. This severely undermines your credibility as petitioners. My father struggled to respond, the lawyer in him fighting through shock. Your Honor, If these assets are real, it only heightens our concern. That kind of wealth in the hands of someone inexperienced is a target for fraud or manipulation, Vance continued, his voice measured. She's been secretive, hiding it even from her own family. That alone indicates instability or self-preservation. The judge interjected dryly. Mr. Frost, you mentioned financial pressures on the petitioners. Elaborate. Miranda remained calm, opening a new folder. Your Honor, we have publicly filed documents showing the Frost's primary residence is heavily leveraged with multiple liens. Records indicate several high-risk investments have failed in the last 18 months. Most significantly, a major malpractice suit has been filed against Sterling and Vance, placing Mr. Frost's partnership and personal assets at direct risk. She handed copies to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge and a visibly ashen Vance. This suit seeks damages exceeding $5 million, Miranda continued. A conservatorship over a daughter with suddenly revealed liquid assets worth over $2.5 million would be remarkably convenient timing. The accusation was stated plainly, a logical conclusion. The scattered puzzle pieces now formed a clear, damning picture. My mother made a small, choked sound. The lie, their supposed concern, died in the thick courtroom air. The judge's expression hardened, scanning their records, my inventory, their panicked faces, and my calm one. Vance made one final desperate move. Your Honor, I move to have this inventory thrown out as prejudicial and irrelevant. My client's financial situation has no bearing on their legitimate concerns. Judge Winslow's voice cut through, low and final. It has every bearing, Counselor. It speaks directly to bias and potential bad faith. The petition is based on a premise conclusively disproven. Miss Frost is not incapable. She is extraordinarily capable. The petitioner's stated concern is contradicted by their ignorance of her life and their own financial pressures. He paused, then began to speak again. But my father, in a reckless outburst, stood and pointed at me. You deceitful little, he roared, his voice echoing. You hid all this from us. After everything we gave you, you owe us. The words were the raw, unfiltered truth of their entitlement. My mother gasped. It was too late. Judge Winslow's eyes went cold. Bailiff, he said sharply, stop immediately. Get security in here now. For a moment, my father froze, stunned by the presence of the officers and the judge's authority. The facade had not just cracked, it had exploded. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth, eyes wide in terror. 2 uniformed court officers moved between our tables, embodying the chasm that had been opened. The judge's demeanor shifted, formidable. Mr. Frost, you will sit down and be silent. Another outburst, and you will be removed and held in contempt. Do you understand? My father's chest heaved. For a second, I feared he'd argue, but the security officers and the judge's stern finality broke him. He slumped into his chair, defeated, suddenly old. The performance was over. Judge Winslow turned to Vance. Counselor, control your client, or I will. Yes, Your Honor. My apologies, Vance muttered, eyes downcast. The judge let silence settle, then addressed the documents before him, my inventory on one side, their financial desperation on the other. What has been presented is one of the starkest contrasts I have ever seen in this courtroom. On one side, a petition alleging incapacity based on speculation, prejudice, and lack of knowledge. On the other, documented evidence of not only capacity, but discipline, acumen, and success. He fixed his gaze on my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Frost, you claimed selfless concern. The evidence suggests otherwise. Your ignorance of your daughter's life is willful. Your own financial distress provides an alternate motive. Your reaction here, he said, glancing at my father, reveals an attitude of entitlement incompatible with the role of a protector. My mother began to cry, not the earlier performative tears, but harsh, silent sobs of shame and exposure. The petition for conservatorship is denied, dismissed with prejudice, the judge continued. Miss Shaw, you have raised serious questions about the petitioner's conduct. Filing a frivolous or malicious petition abuses the court's process and can cause profound harm. I am ordering a formal inquiry into whether this petition was filed in bad faith. You may face sanctions. You will hear from the court on this matter. My father's head dropped into his hands. Sanctions. Formal inquiry. His reputation, already teetering from the malpractice suit, now faced direct judicial consequences. The judge looked at me, softening slightly. Miss Frost, the court apologizes for the ordeal you have endured. You are clearly a woman of substantial ability and character. You are free to go, with the court's confidence that you are fully capable of managing your own life. This case is closed." He slammed his gavel. Definitive. The courtroom erupted into surreal quiet. Security lingered, ensuring a safe exit. Miranda calmly packed her briefcase. I sat, hands flat on the table, absorbing the silence. The war was over. We had won, obliterated the opposition. At the other table, chaos simmered. Vance whispered furiously at my father. My father sat silent, staring at the wood grain, lost. My mother fumbled in her purse, avoiding all eyes. Miranda touched my arm gently. "Let's go. Don't look at them. Don't speak. Just walk." I stood. My legs felt alien, yet they held me. As we passed their table, I glanced over. My father looked up. Fury remained, but now it was mixed with hollow, defeated understanding. He saw me, not his wayward daughter, but a stranger who had outmaneuvered him with resources and resolve. My mother's mascara-streaked face crumpled. "Alone, please," she whispered. I did not respond. I followed Miranda through the heavy doors into the bright courthouse hallway. The contrast was jarring. Life went on. Traffic, lunch, other cases. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. I inhaled deeply. It was over. Miranda smiled, rare and genuine. "You were perfect. Absolutely perfect. They never knew what hit them. The collection." I started to speak, my voice hoarse. "When you told me to get everything appraised, I didn't think it would be a silver bullet," I said. She finished for me. "Alone. It was your discipline, your eye for value, your patience. That collection wasn't luck. It was proof. The most elegant rebuttal to their entire argument. You didn't just manage money, you mastered it. You built a legacy they were too blind to see," Miranda said, squeezing my shoulder. "Go home. Rest. The inquiry into their conduct will proceed. But that's my job now. You are free. Truly free." I nodded, words failing me. Gratitude welled so strongly it was almost painful. "Thank you, Miranda, for everything," I said. "You earned this," she replied simply, then walked back toward the glass building, a warrior returning from a victorious field. I remained on the courthouse steps for a long time. As the adrenaline receded, it left behind a deep, trembling exhaustion. Beneath that, something new stirred. Not happiness, not yet, but a profound, seismic sense of peace. The verdict was more than a legal decision. It was validation. A declaration from a bench of authority. You are competent. You are whole. You are free. The cage my parents tried to build with their doubts, projections, and needs had never had a door. I had been outside it all along. They were the ones trapped inside their crumbling illusions. I drove not to my apartment, but to the rented garage unit across town. Rolling up the door, I revealed my 1965 Ford Mustang, deep forest green, resting under a soft cover. This too was part of me they never knew. A secret joy, a testament to patience and passion. I ran a hand over the flawless chrome bumper. For the first time since the envelope arrived, I smiled. A small, private, real smile. Then I drove home. To my life. The days after the hearing passed in a strange liquid quiet, as if the constant background noise of tension had been abruptly switched off. I returned to work at the Historical Society. Mrs. Gable handed me a cup of overly strong tea. "Don't try to thank me. Just get back to cataloging the Henderson letters. They're a mess." Her normalcy, the demand for competence, hit like a bomb. News of the hearing didn't stay confined to the courtroom. Willow Creek is a small world in a big city. Whispers spread through the country club, the law firm, and my parents' social circles. The story mutated. Dramatic courtroom showdown, hidden fortune, judge threatening sanctions. I heard snippets through Miranda, who monitored closely. My father's law firm, already reeling from the malpractice suit, began distancing itself from him. Partnership reviews were postponed. The vultures were circling. I heard nothing from my parents, no call, text, or letter. Their silence had changed. Before, it had been a weapon of disapproval. Now it was the silence of a defeated army retreating. It held no power over me. A week later, my brother Asher appeared at my apartment. He looked uncomfortable, out of place. We'd never been close, our lives orbiting separately, occasionally passing with a nod. "Eloan," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, surveying my living room, the bookshelves, the art, the warmth of a lived-in space. "Nice place," he said hollowly. "What do you want, Asher?" I heard what happened. Mom and Dad, they're a wreck. The house, legal fees, the inquiry, the judge's order, it's a lot. I said nothing, waiting. They said you had a collection worth a lot of money that you never told anyone, he continued, voice plaintive. Why? Why wouldn't you tell your family? That question revealed their worldview. Family as an entitled entity, claiming all secrets, all assets, all lives. I felt a pang of pity for him, a product of the same system who never questioned the assembly line. Asher, I said softly, if I had told them, what do you think would have happened? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer was obvious. They would have taken over, directed management, investments, sales. My independence, my quiet achievement, absorbed into the crumbling edifice of their status. It wasn't about hiding it from family, I said. It was about it being mine, something I built myself. They never cared about my real life, only the version that fit their narrative. The collection didn't fit, so to them, it didn't exist. He sank onto my sofa, running a hand through his styled hair. Dad's angry, but it's like all the air's gone. Mom just cries, saying she doesn't understand what she did wrong. They didn't see me, I said simply. That's what she did wrong. We sat in silence. The gulf between us was factual, not hostile. They wanted me to come talk to you, he admitted, to see if there was any way to fix things, to help them. There's nothing to fix, Asher, I said. The court fixed it. They don't need my help. They need to face the consequences of their choices, like I did. He nodded slowly, beginning to understand the new reality, a world where I was a separate sovereign state. They're going to lose the house, he said again, almost to himself. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, partly meaning it, not for the loss of a symbol, but for the pain of self-created downfall. He stood to leave, then paused. That car, the Mustang, is it really a 65? A small, genuine smile touched my lips. Yeah, it is. He shook his head, baffled. I never knew you were into cars. There's a lot you never knew, I said gently. He left, and I was alone again with my quiet victory. His visit clarified something. The battle was won, but the aftermath was a country I would navigate alone. My family, as I had known it, was gone. What remained were individuals to relate to on new terms, from a position of unshakable strength. A few days later, Miranda called, brisk with satisfaction. The court's inquiry is moving fast. The judge isn't messing around. Your parents are facing significant financial sanctions for the bad faith filing. It won't bankrupt them, but combined with other troubles, it will force major lifestyle changes. The house is definitely going on the market. Arthur Vance is also facing disciplinary review from the bar. It was justice. Cold, procedural, appropriate. One more thing, Miranda added. A reporter from the Chronicle is interested. Hidden fortune in the archives. Normally I'd say no, but this could be a chance to control the narrative. Tell your side on your terms. The idea of publicity made my reclusive soul cringe, but she was right. Their version of me, the incapable daughter, could linger in whispers. This was my chance to redefine myself publicly. Not a victim or secret miser, but an archivist, a collector, a woman who built a life of quiet meaning. I'll do it, I said. The interview was set for a Saturday afternoon at the Historical Society. The reporter Chloe, with intelligent, non-threatening eyes, began by asking about my job. I showed her the archives, explaining the significance of letters 200 years old and the importance of preserving ordinary stories. Eventually, she addressed the collection. The court documents mention a remarkable personal collection. It seems at odds with someone who needs protection. I took a deep breath. It wasn't an investment strategy. It was a parallel to my work, preserving fragments of history meaningful to me. The financial value is a byproduct of care and time. My parents saw everything in terms of status and transactions. They couldn't understand something could be both personally meaningful and valuable. If it was valuable, it had to be managed their way. If personal, it must be trivial. Chloe nodded, jotting notes. And now, what's next for Aloe and Frost? I looked around the quiet archive, shelves holding centuries of stories. The same as before, I said. My work, my home, my life, maybe with a little less noise. The article was published the following week. The headline read, The Archivist's Fortune, Silence, Secrets, and Self-Made Security. Respectful, nuanced, it portrayed me as a dedicated professional and savvy individual, framing the court case as a clash between outdated control and modern autonomy. My truth was now public, part of the record. That weekend, I did something I hadn't in years. I took the Mustang out of the garage, no destination in mind, just driving. The deep purr of the engine was a tangible reminder of my hidden strengths. Out of the city, onto winding country roads, wind in my hair, sun on the hood, alone, yet not lonely, free. I had reclaimed my life, not just legally, but in my own soul. The little girl hiding in the closet was finally home. Winning a war doesn't stop the world from moving. In the following weeks, ripples from the courtroom spread further than I imagined. The Chronicle article was like a stone dropped in a still pond. The first ripple was professional. Universities, museums, and historical foundations reached out. The article had noted my collection's focus on local industrial history. A professor invited me to collaborate on a digital exhibit. A railroad museum director asked about early train surveys. My quiet expertise, once known only to Mrs. Gable and a few researchers, was now recognized publicly. I wasn't just Alone Frost, the archivist. I was a recognized collector and scholar. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I accepted the exhibit. It felt like a natural step forward. The second ripple was personal and complex. A message arrived from a woman named Laura. "Dear Miss Frost, I read the article about you. My aunt, Eleanor Vance, was Arthur Vance's secretary for 20 years. She has things you should know about your father's firm and its practices. She's willing to speak if you're willing to listen." My heart thumped. Arthur Vance's secretary, a ripple from deep inside the enemy's camp. Miranda's eyes lit up. This could be critical for the court inquiry. Proceed, but meet in public. I can have someone nearby if needed. I met Laura and Eleanor at a quiet tea shop. Eleanor, in her late 60s, sharp and kind-eyed, wasted no time. "I worked for Arthur since he was a junior partner," she said. "I liked him for a long time, but in recent years the firm changed. The malpractice suit put immense pressure on them. Your father's practice was aggressive. When the suit hit, panic was palpable. Arthur was desperate to keep his partner afloat." She continued, describing overhearing a conversation 2 months before the petition. "There has to be something we can leverage. She's the weak link emotionally. We can frame it as concern." Arthur responded, "She won't fight. She'll fold. Once we have conservatorship, we can quietly liquidate. Enough to settle the suit and refinance. We just need the court to see her our way." The words were precise, ugly, confirming my suspicion. It wasn't vague greed. It was a calculated plan to use me as a financial fire escape. My supposed weakness was their cornerstone. Eleanor looked at me sympathetically. When I read the article and saw how wrong they were, I couldn't stay silent. "You weren't just a daughter. They misunderstood. You were a target." I thanked her, throat tight. Her words were a gift, offering brutal closure. The malpractice suit had set the clock ticking. I was the emergency fund they aimed to access. The third ripple came from Asher. This time, he called. "I've been reviewing my finances. Dad had me co-sign loans. I never looked closely. I'm in trouble. Not like them, but it's a mess. I have no idea how to manage it." The golden child discovered the plaster beneath his gilding, facing the consequences of passivity. "I don't expect anything from you, no money, but how did you learn to manage everything alone?" The question was stripped of arrogance, disarming. He wasn't asking for a bailout, but a map. "It starts with looking at the numbers," I said softly. "All of them, even the scary ones. Write everything down. Debts, assets, monthly costs. Stop signing things you don't understand. Make a plan, one step at a time. It's attention, not magic." We spoke for an hour. I gave him names of reputable fee-only advisors and budgeting tools. I didn't solve his problems, but I gave him tools to start. "Thank you, Alone," he said at the end. I'm sorry for everything." It wasn't dramatic reconciliation, just a tentative bridge over the chasm, fragile but existing. The final ripple was internal. With external battles fading, I faced the quiet within. The adrenaline had masked grief, not for the parents I had, but for those I never did. The ones who would have valued my collection, restored the Mustang, celebrated my life. I let myself mourn. In crying, I found cleansing. Mourning a phantom, it lost its power. The space left was free for my own choices, relationships, and definition of family. One evening, Mrs. Gable invited me to dinner, not as a boss, but a friend. Her house was warm, cluttered with cats, books, and the smell of roasting chicken. We talked about work, history, nothing important. As I left, she hugged me fiercely. "You did good, kid. she muttered. Now go live your life. And for heaven's sake, bring that Mustang by sometime. I want a ride. Driving home that night, city lights shimmering, I realized the ripples weren't disruptions. They were the world rearranging around me. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the silent victim. I had a reputation, professional standing, complicated family history, and a coherent self. I was the stone at the center, steady, beginning to understand what that meant. Peace, I discovered, wasn't passive. It was built like a house. With the rubble cleared, I finally had space to lay a foundation not for defense, but for a life truly my own. The first brick, my home. For 5 years, my apartment had been a sanctuary and a subtle fortress. I changed it without drastic measures, hung a large antique city map, bought a deeply comfortable reading chair, and started a small herb garden. Each small act declared, I am staying. I am thriving here. The second brick, my work. The collaboration on the digital exhibit Voices from the Furnace gave my archival skills a new canvas. I curated narratives, weaving letters, schematics, and clippings into a story larger than any single piece. Dr. Evans, the professor, treated me as a peer. Your eye for connective tissue is exceptional, he said. Validation, pure and professional, meant more than any forced family praise ever could. The third and most unexpected brick, community. The article and court notoriety had an odd effect. At the Historical Society, the volunteers I'd worked alongside for years began treating me differently, not with pity or gossip, but with a quiet respect. A few even confided their own family struggles. I found myself, in a small way, a person others regarded as strong. It was a role I had never imagined, yet I did not shrink from it. I listened. I didn't always have solutions, but I could offer a patient, understanding ear. In doing so, I felt less alone. Then there was Asher. Our bridge held. He followed my advice, hired one of the financial advisors I recommended, and began untangling himself from my parents' sinking financial ship. He called every few weeks, not for help, but to report progress. I sold the condo, he said one evening, exhausted but composed. It was too much. I'm renting a smaller place downtown, closer to work. This is simpler. There was no self-pity, only quiet acceptance. He was learning resilience, which humbled him and made him almost likable. He never asked about our parents directly, and I never volunteered. But one day he said, Mom called. She asked if I'd spoken to you. I told him yes. She just said, oh, and changed the subject. The information was neutral, yet telling. The subject of me was now a closed door in their world, a door they had locked, but I had thrown away the key. Miranda's work reached its conclusion. The court determined the petition had been filed in bad faith. My parents were ordered to pay a significant portion of my legal fees and a separate court fine. It wasn't financially ruinous, but another weight against them. Arthur Vance's disciplinary review was still pending, but Miranda reported his reputation in tatters. The legal community had little tolerance for someone attempting to weaponize the courts against a family member. Justice, in its dry procedural way, had been served. With the legal storm settling, I turned to unfinished business. My collection, once secret, then shield, now revealed. I had to decide its purpose. A hoard, an investment, or something else. I invited Dr. Evans and a curator from the State Historical Museum to my apartment, opening a private part of my world to professional scrutiny. We spent an afternoon examining the boxes and climate-controlled cases. The curator, Marie, handled a leather-bound journeyman's log from 1880 with reverence. This is extraordinary, she murmured. The level of daily detail, it's a priceless social record. By the end of the visit, they proposed not to buy the collection, but to house a significant portion on long-term loan at the museum as the centerpiece of a permanent exhibit on state industry. I would retain ownership, while it would be preserved under ideal conditions, studied by scholars, and accessible to the public. Personal pieces, the diaries, could remain with me. It was perfect. My collection would transition from secret fortune to shared legacy, telling stories on a larger scale than I ever could alone. I said yes. The day movers arrived was bittersweet. Boxes I had carried home with private excitement were loaded into a specialized van. But the sadness was clean, like the ache after meaningful work. I was not losing. I was granting it a greater life. That evening, my apartment felt lighter. The ghosts of secrecy were gone, leaving space for the present. I made a simple dinner, ate at my kitchen table, and looked out at the city lights. Silence was no longer hiding. It was contentment. A few days later, I drove the Mustang to Mrs. Gable's house. She stood on the porch, grinning. "About time," she called. We drove along the river parkway, the engine purring. She laughed with delight as we accelerated along an open stretch. "You know, Eloan," she shouted over the wind. "I always knew you had a bit of fire in you. I'm glad the rest of the world finally sees it." I laughed, free and unrestrained. She was right. The fire had always been there, banked carefully through the cold years. Now it was steady, sustaining, and open. The foundation I'd built was strong, based on truth, competence, and chosen connections. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or ahead at what I needed to escape. I was present, solid, and building a life that was enough. Foundations can still be tested. The test came 3 months after the museum took most of the collection. A rainy Thursday evening found me in my armchair with a book, a steaming cup of tea beside me, the world outside blurred by wet streets and glimmering lights. The buzzer sounded sharply. I frowned. No one was expected. Mrs. Gable would have called. Asher would text. I set the book down, pressed the intercom. Silence, then a faint, strained voice. "Alone. It's your mother." The words didn't compute. My mother here at my building in the rain. A cold numbness spread. My finger hovered over the talk button. "Please," she whispered. I need to talk to you. 5 minutes." Every instinct Miranda had drilled into me urged me to say no, to direct her to my lawyer. But a new strength urged morbid curiosity. What could she want now? 5 minutes, I said flatly. I buzzed her in, unlocked the door, but left it closed. Footsteps approached slowly. A knock. I opened. Diana Frost was a ghost of herself. Soaked, trench coat darkened by rain, hair plastered to her scalp, clutching a small wet handbag. No makeup, her face 10 years older, lines etched deeper than time. She didn't step inside, just shivered, eyes wide, searching. "You're wet," I said. "I walked from the bus stop," she murmured. I stepped back. "Come in, you're dripping on the hall carpet." She entered slowly, eyes scanning my apartment, antique map, armchair, herb garden, empty shelves where the collection had been. She said nothing. "Sit," I said, pointing to the kitchen table. I handed her a clean towel. She dabbed her hair mechanically. I remained standing, leaning on the counter, arms crossed. A few feet between us felt like a continent. Rain drummed outside. Finally, she spoke, voice raw and quiet. "We sold the house yesterday. Movers come next week. We're renting in Brookside." I nodded. I heard. She flinched as if my knowledge was accusation. "Your father, he's taken it hard. Doesn't leave the study. Just sits with the blinds closed." She looked up, eyes swimming with confusion so profound it was almost childlike. Alone. What happened? How did it all go so wrong? The question struck me with its sheer lack of self-awareness. Almost absurd enough to laugh at. Instead, a calm clarity settled over me. She truly didn't understand. In her version, they were the victims of a world that had turned against them, of a daughter who had, became too competent, too independent? "You came here to ask me that?" I said, voice even. "You tried to have a court declare me mentally incompetent so you could sell everything I own to cover your debts. The court saw through it. That's what happened." She shook her head, not in denial but in bewilderment. "We were trying to help you, to protect you. You always needed guidance." "I needed parents," I said softly. "Not guides, not managers. Parents who saw me. You never did. You only saw a reflection. When I stopped reflecting what you wanted, you tried to erase the glass." A tear traced a clean path through the rain on her cheek. "We loved you. Did you?" I asked quietly, genuinely curious. "Or did you only love the idea of a daughter you could shape? The woman I am, the one who built this life, you've never loved her. You've never even met her. She had no answer, only her hands twisting the damp towel. The performance was gone. This was the raw, unscripted wreck beneath. Almost more unsettling than her perfect courtroom tears. "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked deliberately. The word felt like a label for a stranger. She shuddered. "I wanted to see where you lived. I wanted to understand. And I wanted to give you this." She fumbled in her wet handbag and produced a small velvet jewelry box, worn at the edges. "It was my mother's, your grandmother's. She left it to me. I was going to give it to you someday. I think someday is now." I didn't touch it. "I don't want your jewelry." "It's not an apology," she said quickly. "I know it can't be. It just belongs with you, not in storage. She would have liked you, you know." Grandma Rose, she liked old things. A ghost of a smile touched her lips and vanished. I finally reached out and opened the box. Inside, on a bed of faded silk, lay a simple silver oak leaf pendant, delicately engraved. Beautiful in its simplicity. Nothing my mother would wear. "Thank you," I said, the only polite response. I closed the box and set it on the table between us, a tiny bridge over an impossible chasm. Her 5 minutes over, she stood dripping in my kitchen. "I'll go," she said. She paused at the door. "Asher says you're doing well, that you're happy." "I am," she nodded, absorbing this like a foreign fact. "Good. That's good." She reached for the doorknob, then turned once more. Our eyes met. For a fleeting second, I saw not my mother, but a woman staring at a locked door she had thrown away the key to. "I'm sorry, Alone," she whispered. For the first time, it sounded like a confession, not a line. Then she was gone, footsteps fading down the stairs. I stood in the sudden silence, rain the only sound. I looked at the little velvet box. I didn't open it again. I put it in a drawer, an artifact, a piece of history no longer mine to carry. Her visit brought no drama, no demands, only a profound, unsettling sadness. But it didn't shake my foundation. If anything, it revealed its strength. I faced the ghost of what was, felt only distant pity. The past held no power here. I returned to my armchair, book in hand, tea lukewarm. The story on the pages felt far more real than the one that had just walked out my door. I was home, finally at peace. Spring arrived quietly, soft green sunlight filling the apartment, making the herbs on my sill glow. The city shook off winter, and life moved into a new rhythm, my rhythm. The museum exhibit, Voices from the Furnace, opened to a small crowd of academics, history enthusiasts, and curious citizens. I observed from the back as people examined the cases holding pieces of my heart. A young student leaned close to trace pencil lines. An older man pointed out a schematic to his grandson. My collection, once secret, was now public, sparking conversation and connection. Its true value went beyond any appraisal. Dr. Evans found me and squeezed my arm. "You did this." "We did," I corrected. Work at the Historical Society took on new depth. I wasn't just preserving the past. I was part of a lineage of caretakers. Mrs. Gable announced her retirement. At her party, she pulled me aside. "You're ready," she said gruffly. "I've recommended you as my successor. The board agrees." Not a title. She meant a responsibility, a sacred trust. I accepted. Asher and I met monthly for coffee. Our conversations remained tentative, navigating siblinghood, unshaped by parental comparison. He spoke of budgeting, a new relationship, living within his means. We never mentioned our parents, and I never asked. We were building something new, fragile but real. The legal sanctions against my parents finalized. Financial loss and the sale of their house forced the lifestyle change Miranda predicted. Their world of control and image evaporated. I felt no triumph, only acknowledgement of cause and effect. They had chosen a path of image over substance. When it shattered, nothing remained. One Saturday, I took the Mustang for a long drive, windows down, scent of blooming earth rushing in. No destination, only the feel of the road. I stopped at a lookout over the river valley. I turned off the engine, listening to birds and the distant hum of the city. I reflected on the journey, from the girl hiding in the closet to the woman here, restored car, self-chosen vista. Life is measured not by battles won, but by peace built after the noise fades. Not by fortune amassed, but by meaning created. Not by family born into, but by connections chosen, and those released with grace. My life was in the quiet order of my archives, the purr of my engine, the thoughtful silence of coffee with my brother. Measured in the courage to say no to a life not mine, and even greater courage to say yes to one that was. I had entered the courtroom fearing I would have to prove I wasn't fragile. I walked out, proving I was whole, resilient. The judge's gavel didn't just close a case. It opened the door to the rest of my life. If you're watching this, maybe you faced your own courtroom. A family dinner, a workplace, a relationship where people tried to define your worth. My story is a reminder. You are the only appraiser of your life. Your value isn't set by those who underestimate you. Your strength is in the peace you build when you claim your freedom. Sometimes walking away is the first step. Sometimes standing your ground is the only step. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't vengeance. It's a life lived quietly, fully, on unshakable terms. If this resonated, share your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Your story matters. Hit like if you found strength here, share with someone who might need it, and subscribe to join a community learning to build their own foundations. Remember, the most important list you'll ever have is the one you write for yourself, the list of who you are and all you can become. Go write it.